so we can see who else is here.
I think you can do it by just clicking on the participants.
Oh,
So bring it up on this
There
side,
you go.
then you can see everybody.
so I know we're still waiting on, oh, ta-da.
Well, traffic was a
They
little
shall
bit of
appear.
a
Yes.
booster.
Uh-oh, yeah.
Traffic in Woodland, are you sure?
No, not Woodland, on the freeway. Do you want us up in the front or you want us in the back?
Table.
Back here?
You don't
Yeah.
get a hide.
Careful, record time.
There's one right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody decided that it was a good time to do maintenance today, apparently. Yeah.
During
Hey,
the-
nice to see you.
Long time no see.
I know, pleasure.
Yeah, during the fair of all times, right?
Yeah, there's no good time for maintenance, especially now that we're switching to mainly daytime work, you know? Too many people, get too many people getting hit during nighttime projects, so.
Sign-in sheet in case you missed it back there. Yes. Yeah.
Good.
Good, I like it there, you know?
Dylan used to be one of our planners in the county, and he left us for DOT.
Well, with a short layover at Mall Foster for
Oh,
about a year.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's right. And it was close to your living, where you were living.
2 blocks away, yeah. That was a pretty sweet commute when
I'm sure.
whenever I had to go into the office.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
So if we're up and running, Tracy, I appreciate, or Amanda, I appreciate it. So we'll go ahead and get started here. It looks like we have both a lot of our attendants online. What's that? Okay. So thank you very much for attending today, whether it's online or in person. We have, we will be recording this meeting, and it will be available online on the same agenda. So that should be posted up there, if not before the end of the day, probably tomorrow. The first thing I wanted to do is thank you for coming. This has been a long time in coming, and we've been discussing it for a while. And I wanted to do a quick run around and have everybody introduce themselves, just so that we have it on the record of everybody who's attending online as well as in person. So if you could, please come up to the microphone and make sure we get your name and organization or why you're here on the record. I would appreciate that. So we'll start. I'm Travis Goddard. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Woodland, and I've been here for about 5 years. And I appreciate the county initiating this process and the cooperative agreement that we have signed, and this is kind of the first step of that. So we're going to do everything we can to try and make this a successful effort, and appreciate the county's stepping up.
Wayne Nelson, Planning Manager for Cowles County.
I'm Tracy Jackson, Director of Building and Planning for County.
Good afternoon, Dylan Bass, Transportation Planner with WashDOT, Southwest Region.
I'm Tel Jensen, Planning Commissioner in Woodland.
I'm Robin Zorich, Planning Commissioner for City of Woodland.
Jennifer Ray Keene, Executive Director, Port of Woodland, and we are a landowner and identified very clearly in this agreement.
Bill?
Bill Fashing, Director of the Cowlitz-Wahkiakum Council of Governments.
I am Jerry Big Eagle with the Cowlitz Indian Tribe. I'm the DIPO officer. Thank you for having me, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody?
Yep.
I'm John Norm, the fire chief for Clark Cowles Fire Rescue. We are the fire and emergency medical services provider to the city of Woodland since 2013.
And I'm Terry Hall, Woodland City Council.
David Simpson, Planning Commissioner, retired, and property owner and citizen.
Erin Thoney, landowner and resident of the Woodland Bottoms, and I'm the person that keeps bringing up the problem with the west side of the Davidson Avenue Railroad crossing for years.
Okay, Andrew, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, yeah, my name is Andrew Levins. I work with Van Ness Feldman, and I'm a planning consultant hired to help out where I can on behalf of the county.
Thank you. Carol?
Hi, I'm Carol Reese with Gibbs and Olson, and I'm assisting with some of the drainage evaluation within the Woodland Bottoms area.
Thank you. And, Janine Parker?
Yes, Janine Parker. I am a special counsel for the Diking District, and I'm representing Mr. Harbison, who will be joining us a little bit later. He had a conflict he's just finishing up and will be joining shortly for the Diking District.
Great, thank you. Lacey Hoffman.
Hi, Lacey Hoffman from Ecological Land Services. Work on a lot of environmental permitting projects in the Woodland Bottoms, so I'm just trying to keep up with things and keep a tab on everything.
Thank you very much. Mark?
Yes, Mark Smith, Cowles County Planning Commission.
Thank you very much. Okay, Megan.
Megan Tate with the Department of Ecology, Wetland Shoreline Specialist.
Thank you. Ryan.
Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Walters with Gibbs and Olson. I am the City of Woodland Consulting City Engineer.
Thank you, Ryan. Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie Simpson with Ecological Land Services. I work with Lacey, and we do a lot of work in the Woodland Bottoms area.
Great, thank you. Todd.
Thanks. I'm Todd Deinhardt, local resident and candidate for mayor.
Great, thank you very much for being here, Todd. Okay, that looks like everybody online, so we've got that all on the record. I'm gonna try and keep this as short and sweet. And at least one other person has another meeting to get to, so we'll try and keep this simple. So the next thing on the agenda is the background of kind of why we're here. And for those of you who have listened to my many poking the bear sessions and comment sessions over the last 5 years, the City of Woodland has a 2016 comprehensive plan, and it was basically based on analysis that was either based on 2013 or 2015 numbers that were depending on the chapter. And so we are basically about 10 years out from some of that analysis, even though it was actually adopted in 2016. So some of the information is quite dated. We did and that was based on a 2017 sewer plan. So it was a new sewer plan when we adopted the comp plan. And so that part of the data is correct. We did a 2018 update process where we revisited potential expansion and had some internal changes to our comprehensive plan. We've adopted a 2020 water plan. And then in 2021, we completed a vacant building lands model and a housing needs assessment. And then in 2023, this year, we've updated our comprehensive park plan. So a lot of the pieces that we need to update our comp plan have been done. And in 2023, we were talking to the mayor and the city council, and we were looking at the state mandated update to our comprehensive plan. So we're supposed to do a 8-year update. And we were hoping not to follow the 2025 date. We were looking at the 2026 date in the RCWs for Cowlitz County. So we were hoping to try and do a quick review of our comprehensive plan in 2023 so that the bottoms process we assumed it would be 2024, maybe bleed into 2025. And then after that was done, we would be able to really take a serious look at our comprehensive plan, potentially hire a consultant in 2025, 2026 for that update. Unfortunately, things are moving much faster than we expected now that they're moving. So we have this effort moving forward to discuss what's going on with the bottoms. And frankly, I expected us to have to complete that, and then we would have a document in hand that we could waive in our discussion with the diking district to ask them to take a look at what's going on with the diking district, the infrastructure and the drainage and flooding potential, and the impacts that would have on them once we had that document in hand. But they have seen what's happening. They understand the importance of their role, and they've actually stepped up and engaged a consultant to take a look at the bottom. So the diking district is really doing a positive thing for us and actually engaging that work now. So we may even have some of that information that overlaps with the bottoms planning process. So that's moved to the front. We also got a letter from the Washington State Department of Commerce, and they indicated that they expect Woodland to follow the Clark County deadline and be done in 2025, not 2026 like we had hoped to. And to help ease the burden, they have committed a significant amount of funds to the city for a grant to update our comprehensive plan. And it is, half of it is due, half of it is actually we're already able to charge to that grant from June of this year to June of next year. And then the second half of that grant will be June of 2024 to June of 2025. So unfortunately, what it means is while I was hoping to quickly go through the comprehensive plan, give it a little tweak, make sure we're on course, and then fully focus on the bottoms planning, it looks now like we're going to have to do the bottoms planning at the same time the diking district is doing their review, while we're trying to do a major update of our comprehensive plan at the same time. So unfortunately, the timing seems to be coming together at the exact wrong time for us. So I'm hoping that won't make things too difficult, but it means we might have parallel conversations going on at the same time. To give you a little background about what's going on in the city, our comprehensive plan said and we have about 38% of that has been developed in essentially the 8 years that have occurred since the comp plan was adopted. And 548 acres of industrial, of which we have developed about 25% of that in the 8 years since that was adopted, or 7, 8 years since it was adopted. The comprehensive plan also said we had 271 acres of vacant residential land, but according to our vacant buildable lands model a couple years ago, we estimated that we actually have about 63 acres of developable land, because a significant amount of it is zoned residential, but it's in the floodway or the floodplain, or it is wetland. And so significant amounts of it cannot be developed. So the comp plan called for about 1,400 additional residential units, and looking at the net 60 plus acres that we identified in the vacant buildable lands model, we estimated how many units we could build on that, and we estimated we could build about 601 units out of the 1,397 units that the comprehensive plan identified. So we know we're significantly limited on the amount of development that could occur, and that was at the planned densities. Our actual achievement densities is much lower than what the comp plan called for. So building activity, we've built 149 units in the 8 years. So we're essentially 8 years into our 20-year plan, and we have achieved about 10% of our planned residential growth. So we're way behind the curve on residential growth, but we're right along the estimates for commercial and industrial growth. Now we do have some approved residential developments, and they are about 471 multifamily units and about 184 single-family residential lots that have been approved. Unfortunately, none of them are at the construction phase, so we're looking probably next year is when the single-family residential will start. And unfortunately, of those 471 multifamily units, one of them, a 250-unit apartment building on Lewis River, they are actually reevaluating those 250 units, and they may go to 75 to 90 residential. So the bottom line is we are about 718 to 850 units short of our planned 20-year growth, and that means that we are looking between 125 and 225 acres of residential land that is developable or developable short of our projected growth. So this discussion about what goes on in the bottoms and how the city can look at expansion of our urban growth boundary is getting pretty big because of the 68 acres that is actually vacant and developable. About 45 of that is currently in development. So we literally have a few small infill sites and two multifamily zoned properties that are developable. So we theoretically have a bunch of approvals, but nobody's building anything, and we don't have a lot of vacant land that people can even try to develop. So for us, we're kind of at the stage where planning for the bottoms is super important. Now, the other thing that we have hanging over us is at the table is a handout for new traffic. So since I got here in 2018, I have kept a meticulous track of project approvals and the estimated number of trips from each one of those projects. As a project gets built, I would move it from the approved column into the constructed column. And the city has worked on a series of handouts that are available online. And I think there's 6 of them. So I did one for 2018, the new traffic from 2018 development, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. And then this one that you have in front of you is by land use. So since 2018, all the development that has occurred, we've approved projects that will trigger about 2,126 rush hour trips. That's PM peak hour trips. But the actual constructed projects is equal to about 670 trips. So only about 31% of the development that has been approved, those trips are actually on the road. 34% of those trips are from commercial developments. 42% of the approved trips are from industrial projects, are from residential projects, and about 7% of those trips are from public projects. And by that, we're talking parks, library, those kind of issues, new water plant, maybe a new school, although we don't have any of those approved. But that's specifically what's in the public project title. And of the development that has been constructed, about 30% of the total projects approved have generated traffic. 80% of the traffic growth that is on our roads is from commercial development. 12% of it, about 12% of it is from industrial projects, and about 8% of it is from residential. So we are very aware of the fact that traffic is a major concern in the community and in the agencies and developer community. So we've been keeping track of that. We're trying to get this information distributed as efficiently and effectively as we can now with these handouts. So if you have any questions, I encourage you to ask me. You can call me at the office, you can email me, or if anybody is in this meeting, that is essentially the end of the background portion of this meeting. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them before we move on. Dave? No? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So, I'm sorry, is there anybody online who might have a question? If you want to raise your hand, we can, or turn your mic off, I think we can answer questions. Okay. So with that, the next part of the exercise or this meeting is I wanted to take a few minutes to do some brainstorming. And specifically, I have a couple questions, or no, I'm sorry. I guess we want to do stakeholder roles first. So everybody who got an invitation to this meeting is the preliminary list of stakeholders that the county and I brainstormed for this meeting as kind of a kickoff. If there's anybody in your agency who would be a better contact or that should also be included on this list, the expectation is that we will continue to send out invites and notices for meetings, hearings, open houses, all of that stuff. And of course, we will deliver draft documents or notes as this stuff gets prepared. So anybody who can think of somebody else who needs to be on this list, specifically for like Aaron and Dave. Okay, if you know anybody and if you think they need to be involved, make sure you get their contact information to either myself or the Cowlitz County staff, and we will make sure that they start getting wallpapered with all of the notices and that stuff that comes up. So we don't know who we don't know to involve, and we're trying to reach out as best we can, but word of mouth, especially amongst the property owners, it's going to be important. And they may be interested in attending meetings and open houses, but they may not necessarily want to take on more of a stakeholder role, which we believe eventually at some point there's going to be a committee that's going to be assembled, and we're going to want some pretty broad representation from both the regulatory stakeholders, but also the property owners, stakeholders. Sorry, Jen, that includes you as well. And so whether there's going to be recommendations or votings or regulatory policies that are recommended, that's going to be part of this planning process. And it may not be part of the direct process. It may just be that we adopt recommendations that some additional code changes for both the county and the city have to be incorporated. So we're going to need some county planning commission, city planning commission, property owner involvement for that grassroots level. So if you can think of anybody who's not here, please get their information to me and we'll reach out to them. So after that, the next thing on the agenda is a brainstorming exercise. And because this is stakeholders, especially with a lot of our regulatory and technical experts, I was hoping to ask some questions and throw up on the, so we have a big post-it board for us to write down these answers. So we're going to do, the first question I'm going to ask is, are there any particular regulatory issues or jurisdictional issues that we need to be aware of and we need to keep in mind as we go through this process?
Could you clarify what you mean by it, since, I mean, you're the jurisdictions.
Okay, so that's a good point. So Jennifer asked if I could clarify exactly what that means. So we're in the funky position of dealing with jurisdictional issues. Kind of why we're here at the start is the city of Woodland is concerned about development and activity that occurs in the Woodland Bottoms because it's outside of our jurisdiction and it's not under our urban growth boundary, and they are not a fully planning jurisdiction under the GMA. And so we are going to try, part of our internal conversation with the county is going to be how we're going to try and reconcile those two things. At the same time, the shoreline jurisdiction along the Lewis River and the Columbia River, the city of Woodland does not have to deal with the Columbia River, but the county shoreline program does address it. The city of Woodland does have Horseshoe Lake jurisdiction as in the shoreline, as does Cowlitz County. And then Cowlitz County and the city of Woodland both have Lewis River shoreline jurisdiction. And so our shoreline programs were generated at the same time, but my understanding is it was kind of a county-wide effort, and each jurisdiction within the county was asked to take it to their council, make the tweaks necessary to make it fit for the individual cities. Generally, the framework between the county and the city comprehensive plans are, or I'm sorry, the county and the city shoreline programs are pretty much consistent. And so we are going to have to wrestle with the fact that we're GMA compliant and shoreline compliant. The county's going to have to wrestle with how we're going to define urban growth boundary expansion in a non-fully planning GMA jurisdiction for a fully planning jurisdiction, and how we're going to coordinate the shoreline programs so that if it's annexed into the city or becomes part of our UGA, how will it be regulated in addition to the zoning and that kind of stuff. Fish and Wildlife is here, and they deal with, you know, aspects that may be above and beyond what we think of as our critical area ordinance. Ecology is here to help us, to give us advice on how that shoreline is going to work. Department of Transportation is multi-jurisdictional in this case as well. So I'm just wondering whether there's anything that may not be on our radar that you foresee coming, or that you want us to make sure we have a discussion about your concerns about this multi-jurisdictional, partially planning, fully planning GMA stew that we're about to cook up when we discuss the bottoms. Oh, yeah.
So for the Port of Woodland, how this came about for our concerns was a lack of consistency of standards between the City of Woodland transportation, drainage, infrastructure, to the county, the properties that we have in the county to do the planning. It first actually arose with when we were doing an industrial park in the city and we were having to deal with the county and the city because of one road. This became a bigger issue as trying to do planning for our properties along the waterfront at Martin Bar and Austin Point when we're talking about getting from Pinkerton. We had Ajo construction, which obviously is one of the biggest things that really caused a lot of this. But trying to get the overpass and plan for this, and even our consultants were having a real difficulty of all the different standards and lack of consistency from one section of road to another section of road to another section of road when they are literally the same road. And so in this case, we're talking about Wayland Road. That was probably one of the biggest things. And this also came about also when Columbia River Carbonates did their development on the waterfront, their connection to then Caples, then coming into the city, and with those improvements and such. Whatever we may develop, it is a difficult way to try to plan to bring infrastructure out there without knowing, you know, if it's a difference of a road standard where the city may want a 80-foot, you know, pathway that but the county wants like 27 feet. Or one portion of the county road has no sidewalks, no anything. These are old farm roads and things like that. And then we're being requested, now we want 4 lanes and a sidewalk and landscaping strip. You guys need to figure out these roads that literally that are the same name, going from the city to the county, back to the city, or vice versa. The other thing has to be the drainage. Yes, that the diking district is looking at a portion of the diking, of the bottom portion, but not of the areas of the mountains, you know, and the hillside coming in that are impacting the bowl, really, of the area. And so how to plan for that water to get out. The other thing that we got to deal with is, and who's not in the room, is the U.S. Corps of Engineers, who really oversees the dike and what can be improved on the dike of that old farm road of dike access that surrounds that whole area and the infrastructure and everything that needs to be done. How those improvements, because right now I don't think anybody here is sitting in Congress, and you have to have an action of Congress to make any changes on dike road. So though you guys want to do that, that's the main roadway, and we can't widen it, we can't put shoulders on it, we can't do anything without going through our federal legislative body. So those are the main issues that I see, let alone that, you know, we have a third bridge that we need to, you know, an access point, because as we all know, one landslide and we take out the entire community. So those, we've got to talk about the flow.
Thank you. She stole your thunder. I was going to ask you to talk about the
Who wants
bridge.
to follow that?
I'm only starting.
Again, Bill Fashing with the Council of Governments. From a transportation, I think part of what needs to happen fairly quickly is getting some clarity on what the community sees happening in the bottoms over the next 20, 30, 40 years. And I don't want to push ideas on them, but what I'm seeing and hearing is continued development in the area, maybe some preservation of large acreages for this or that, but the farmland and such 20, 30, 40 years from now is going to be few and far between unless we make a conscious decision to protect that today. And that's what the county, the city, the residents need to work together to figure out. Once we have a sense of that, then we need to lay out the transportation network and grid and start trying to reserve right-of-way so that we can have the necessary transportation infrastructure to get people where they need to get, including south across the river into Clark County, which will be an ongoing challenge, bringing a third party to the table to try and agree on what the future of the region looks like. So, and I could add more, but just to start with, I think we need to get a good handle on what it is we want to and what the vision is for the region, and then we can start to put together pieces. And so that economic development plan and I'm hoping there's some vision for some open space and some recreational space and those types of things as we move forward, and not pure development.
We're having a workshop on it this next meeting. good point that Bill brought up was the use of that farmland. One of the things that we have, that we don't, the main farmers are not here that own that land. One of the larger families, two of them actually, are the ones who brought forth the Aho development. And this was not a county issue, this was not a city issue, this is not an agency issue. This is some of these farming families that may elect to sell some of their land. And, you know, it comes into a property rights situation, which we've heard a lot about, is what if these families do want to sell their land and get out of the farming? And I know that there's blowback to the city and the county and WashDOT and everybody else on that, but how do you prevent them for having the right to develop or sell their land or change the development and force the farming? I know we need to preserve that, but do they have a right? Did the Donalds and Fergusons have a right to do that? And nobody can family.
I mean, that makes me think of, there are examples of purchasing development rights so that, you know, landowners are compensated for, you know, those rights that are taken away. I don't know if anybody's explored that in this case, or if that's even a likely possibility, but there are precedents for that.
As far as putting it in conservancy or something, or?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Or, you know, various land trusts. Yeah.
I'll go next. Again, for the record, Dylan Bass, Washington State Department of Transportation. You know, our interest in this joint planning effort is the fact that anything that happens in the Woodland Bottoms is going to come right to our facilities. State Route 503 and I-5, you know, they're both critical connection points. Both exits 22 and 21 are critical for not only residents, but also for the port and other, you know, other commercial industrial developments. And so, you know, we need to obviously make sure that we're providing a transportation network that is safe, reliable, one that allows for mobility. I think we also need to consider all users too. You know, bikes, peds, you know, people that are walking, or even, you know, people with disabilities as well. And, you know, with that, you know, with urban level development, we need to have urban level of service for those facilities. And so if that means, you know, for example, a development is going to occur in the county, you know, we need to have facilities that meet that urban, you know, that urban context. You know, with that, I think a challenge might be just funding, you know, just for, I'm sure y'all are aware of this, but for WashDOT, you know, everybody thinks like, hey, look at this huge budget that WashDOT has. The fact of the matter is it's all appropriated before we get it. And so, you know, with that, and I think with this plan, you know, there could be an opportunity, you know, for, you know, the legislature to maybe step up and provide some additional funding in areas that may be lacking too.
Will it put us in a better position to request funding if we have a comprehensive plan idea that crosses boundaries?
I think just having some form of plan is helpful, frankly. You know, I don't have a good read on the legislature, you know, but I think, you know, doing this effort and, you know, getting that kind of ground floor, you know, level, or that, you know, that kind of 10,000 foot view plan, for lack of better terms, I think will be helpful, for sure.
Travis, if I can maybe respond to that last part. WashDOT has, for the last couple of years, had a group called the Investment Strategy Committee, that has been looking at exactly those types of things. How do we better prioritize and put in queues limited number of expansion projects to the highway system? I think, speaking not for the department, but what I'm hearing from the department is there's barely enough money to maintain the system we have today, and so we need to do a better job of prioritizing the new construction that we're going to do so that we can afford as a state to continue to maintain all of that. So as part of that investment strategy process, a variety of things are being looked at. Whether any of them ever happen will be another issue, but efforts are underway to try to provide the legislative bodies with ranked prioritized project list, either coming out of the regional transportation planning organizations or metropolitan planning organizations, coming up through the process. So the more planning we do, the more preparation, I think the better off we're going to be over time in going after those state dollars and ultimately federal dollars for the bigger projects.
The fact that we're potentially in 2 RTPOs, does that make it better or worse?
Yes. As long as we're continuing to communicate with RTC in Vancouver, I think we're in good shape. We have more partners, more legislative partners to bring to the table with that scenario, so it could be a very positive thing over time if we can get Vancouver and Clark County to look beyond their more internal growth needs.
And I apologize to Bill because that was kind of a leading question, because my philosophy all along has been the fact that we're stuck at the border. We need to have a full understanding of what's happening, the intersection between the two. Like our traffic counts from exit 21 going into Clark County is huge when we're trying to create that bridge, because they assume, yeah, 84 people who live in Woodland are Clark County residents, and the other 6,800 are Cowlitz County residents. So, but it's not just the 84 residents who are creating trips into Clark County. There's a significant number that's above and beyond that, and the more information we have and the more information we know, the better off we'll be able to have those conversations. So I also want to point out, I'll take this opportunity to point out that the city has a website for planning projects and city projects, and anybody who's interested in the exit 21 work that was done, we have maps. We have a page for that, and we have the maps of the 2 options that were identified as a result of the massive report that was produced, and those are on the website. And the city is just hired a consultant to begin with the design, and that design is funded by the county. The county gave us, I think it's 2.6, something like 2.1 million to actually proceed with that design and finish off the decision-making process and the design process, so that we'll be in line to get construction money. And while he's here, I want to thank the COG, because I think they helped us get the money to do that initial study. So it's an example of how our regional and our partners are helping the city. Although we may complain like they're not, they are helping us very much. And the fact that they're here in the Diking District is another great example of how they are coming to our rescue to help have this discussion. It's no longer us shouting in the woodlands, so to speak. Chief Nord, you maybe want to give us thoughts?
I'll steal your microphone.
Yeah.
So as the fire and EMS provider for the city of Woodland, we have concerns about any development that further impacts our ability. The area in the bottoms is served by a predominantly volunteer fire department, Cowlitz County Fire District 1, and we respond on a very regular basis on their calls in that area. So anything that allows development in unincorporated county that would drive a larger number of incidents that the volunteer department has difficulty in responding to, it impacts the city of Woodland because we're now using our unit from the city of Woodland to respond to those incidents. So we just want to see a coordinated development that ensures that that allows us as emergency service providers to respond appropriately and to the calls that come up. Beyond that, we need a road network and a response network that allows us to respond in a timely fashion. So our goal is to make 90% of our calls in 6 minutes of travel time. And to do that, we've got to be able to get through city streets that are sometimes congested. We've got to get down rural country roads that aren't always the most advantageous to take our ambulances or our light brush response units or our heavy fire engines on. So we support the city of Woodland in their actions in trying to ensure that things are developed in a manner that's consistent with making sure we can provide all the services we need to provide. Any questions for me or the things that we look at as a fire and emergency service provider?
So if there was additional development in the Woodland Bottoms, do you think that an extension of the services to the Woodland Bottoms would be necessary because of the volunteer system? So let's say we now have Columbia River Carbonates coming aboard, or residential down there?
It would. So people drive call volume. So except for the occasional lightning strike, fires happen where people are. And for emergency medical service calls, they always happen where people are. And so it will drive the number of calls that we have. But I can also tell you, and the fire chief for Cowlitz 1 isn't here today, but he would confirm that the number of times that we have something called mutual aid. So you help us, we'll help you. You have a need, we go help you out. You have a need, we have a need, you help us out. Last year, we responded in Cowlitz 1's area 66 times. They responded to the city of Woodland 1 time, or into our response area 1 time. It's out of balance. The reason it's out of balance is because it's very hard to maintain a volunteer fire department. But it's very hard also to have a career fire department if the tax base doesn't support it. I'm kind of old school in the fire service. I don't ever let anybody hanging out there. I'll never say to somebody, we're not coming because we're not in your area. So we send our units regularly. They actually monitor the tap out channels for Cowlitz 1, and they'll put themselves on calls once in a while knowing that there's no, by time of day of week, there's not going to be any volunteers to respond. Because we don't ever want somebody to suffer more so from a medical emergency or lose more of a structure to a fire than has to. So we watch this just to make sure that we're able to continue to provide that service. And a well-planned development will ensure that the water supply is there, the road network's there, and we can put the infrastructure there we need to respond.
And we do know that there is a volunteer fire station in the Bottoms, right?
Correct.
And so depending on the amount of whether it's port development or county development, if it's commercial or industrial, if they need a ladder truck, do they have any of that equipment there, or is that stuff that you would normally?
They don't have a ladder truck, and based on the general risk profile for their district, they wouldn't need one now. If they needed one, they would call it from us on mutual aid. We keep a ladder truck. They call for it. But if you had extensive development, yeah, those types of things. For somebody to have a WSRB rating, that's the Washington Survey and Rating Bureau. That's a rating they give your fire department on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being the best possible fire service, 10 being essentially no fire service. And I will tell you that there are no Class 1 departments in the state of Washington. There's only a couple Class 2s. We're a Class 4 department, so that means that people that your insurance rates are based on that. So the better the classification, the better your insurance rate. So a lot of times in the rural areas, you're looking at a 6, 7, or 8 in a classification. So you pay a higher amount for insurance. people that want to come in and develop industry, develop manufacturing or other commercial properties, that's one of the things they look at and say, well, if we don't have the right response capability, our insurance rates can be a lot higher, and that may affect their decisions to make on that.
The other thing I wanted to add is, although the Woodland Police Department isn't here, Chief Jackson or Chief Kelly's not in the office. He is very similar to you, that he has a high response number, but he also points out, as did Chief Jackson when I think he first introduced that 66-to-1 number, and that is because you guys do have a quick response times, you tend to turn up faster. And then when the volunteers do get there, that they may assume the duties, whether it's the sheriff's office or help with the medical services or whatever it is. So it's not necessarily that the county doesn't respond, it's that it's the primary response, and then you guys may leave a scene after somebody else has taken over responsibilities. So.
Correct. There are days where they have no responders available. So, and again, I can tell you from experience in our own department, our waning volunteer program, we still have volunteers at CCFR that assist us with water tender. That's the, we'll if there's no hydrants, we bring large tanks of water with us. We have volunteers that do that, and we have some limited, what we call combat volunteers. They take shifts at the fire station and supplement the crew. They go in and fight the fire when we have them. It's just hard to do in an area that's close to an urban setting. There's communities, maybe you go on the east side of the state, and they're very small communities. They have no choice but to have volunteers. But it's over here on the west side, it's hard to get people to volunteer. It's a big time commitment. It's a big training commitment. The state doesn't lessen the training requirements just because you're a volunteer. Everybody has to meet these requirements. So people are out at Little League games, they're at church functions, and they're saying, I just don't have time to do that. So it's just really hard to keep a roster going.
Isaac? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Isaac Kolowatz, Fish and Wildlife. Some of the concerns that Fish and Wildlife would be concerned about would be fish passage. As we continue to increase our roads and our infrastructure, we're going to be replacing culverts, and we need to make sure that they provide fish passage for all fish, all species during all life stages, low flows, high flows, all of the above. So that's going to make a big, that's going to cost a lot, and it's going to require a lot of thoughtfulness, because right now there's a lot of culverts that are failing that have been passing water for years that no one even thinks about, that when we go to replace them, we're going to have to provide a much bigger culvert or bridge in some cases, and the community will be like, well, why are we spending, thousands of dollars more, maybe $1 million more, depending on whatever the project is, that we've had a culvert for years, we never worried about it. Well, the salmon, the fish populations are all decreasing, and there are rules we need to follow. So that's definitely something that Fish and Wildlife would be concerned about. Oregon white oaks are something that in the past maybe people thought of as less than ideal species of concern, and we are finding that they are very important for all the different wildlife and species that utilize them. They're very slow growing, so that is definitely something that we are trying to protect. Things like the cottonwoods. The cottonwoods provide a lot of habitat for great blue herons and other species concerned. So anyways, kind of like some of the other people have spoken earlier about protecting large swaths of land for the community, but also for protecting wildlife, I think are something that we are concerned about.
And that's not just riparian
in the bottoms that are fish bearing today?
So right now there are a couple of sloughs. I apologize. I'm not going to try to say the name because I'm just going to not say them correctly. That are listed as fish-bearing streams. That they, in my experience, have just been manipulated. Whether they were filled in, whether they were diked, or they were, they have been so manipulated over the past, however, hundreds of years through our activities that you may be standing on a creek and you may not even know it because they've been filled in, or there's they've been culverted, or a lot of different things like that. So yes,
Have migrating fish?
they probably would have if we had
Well,
not.
that's a whole other issue too.
So right now, yes.
Right now, they're behind the dike, they're pumped out in certain occasions, so they're
Right.
not gonna carry migratory fish.
Right, but they are still listed as a fish-bearing stream now.
Fair enough.
So we have to account for them to be for fish passage.
Any thoughts? Yeah, you want to come on? Snake size.
Thank you.
How many of you guys know me? Never met you. You never met me before in my life. Erin Thoney, lifelong resident of Woodland, major landowner in the Woodland Bottoms. Just to give you another bit of my background, I have had previous committee life on Raspberry Commission, State Raspberry Commission, International Raspberry Commission, formerly on the Fish and Wildlife Advisory Commission, not Fish and in Canadian geese with the Migratory Bird Farm Service Agency, and I'm also on the Washington State Farm Bureau Board. So I have a well-rounded experience, but most importantly, I have experience here in Woodland, and my family's been here since 1952. Probably none of you guys know about the background, is that in the 1970s there was none of the area was zoned. So there was a trend of turning things into 5-acre plots in the bottoms. So the farmers all got together and hashed out a plan of the Ag 38, and then keeping area for industrial, which is called Ag Industrial, along the railroad tracks. And then having down on the river, there were some shanty shacks down there, and they kind of said, well, that could be housing, which just kind of turned partially into big mansions now. And then on the east side of the railroad tracks, they really didn't want to be zoned, so that was unzoned. So I see this whole issue that there's east side of the railroad tracks bottoms, there's that west side of the railroad tracks bottoms. One thing that I'm well, also, I was also the person that's, Jennifer and I, years ago, that started the infrastructure study for the industrial area. And so, unfortunately, I never got a copy of that from the city. I had to get a copy of that from Jennifer. So I have great insight into fish and wildlife. I also have great insight of, people expect, well, there is the private property rights of the bottoms. You guys need to know a bit of the history of the farm in the bottoms. I'm also a historian in town. Is that we were greatly into dairy. Dairy has since changed. I spend my life lobbying with the farmers. That was great into dairying. Then they that kind of waned out. Then I went into a lot into cannery crops for National Frozen Fruit and some other fruit processors in the area. One of those went bankrupt. That hurt a lot of people. There's also we used to raise carrots. We used to raise about 500 acres carrots in the bottoms, 800 acres of carrots east of the mountains. We used to package and ship them to Safeway, Thriftway, Albertsons, all over the West Coast. There was concentration and consolidation with the grocery stores and chain stores and big monopolies in California that put us out of that business. So it's not just easy to say, well, there's a farmland, we need to save the farmland. You have to figure out the other economic factors of it. A lot of the farmers, we got recruited into berries by China. Then we got recruited into raspberries. I was one of the parties that actually sued the country of Chile for dumping practices. We won the battle, we completely lost the war. There's no more really commercial for processing berries in the area. The bottoms had a lot of berries. So they tried to put a cucumber plant a few years ago, not that long ago, up in Longview. And the city of Longview wouldn't sell them land because they figured they couldn't get enough tax base out of it. So you have to remember that farmers are a business. They have to make money. They don't have 401ks, they don't have pension plans. They don't, they're generally doing crappy equipment. One thing that's coming down the road, which is kind of concerning, is that the California standards that a few years from now, they're going to require all electric farm equipment. Most farmers can't afford any new equipment now. Combines can cost $500 to $1 million. A lot of the bottoms now is in grass seed. And so, and again, that is a labor problem because, labor is expensive. You can do a lot of cropping and you don't have to have a lot of labor. Farm stand issues, do farm stand that requires a lot of labor. There's also the food safety aspects in this. So the agricultural issue is not an easy conflict. I could give you an entire day talking about this, but I don't think you want to hear about that. So, and then my concern is that one person I don't see in this room is railroad. That is a major issue. I've heard rumors that they want to close the Davidson Avenue Railroad crossing. That will kill downtown Woodland. That is kind of the major arterial between the bottoms and downtown. If you close that, you have to go down to Wayland, and you're funneled more up into exit 21 to get into downtown to the post office. There is no east side of the railroad road between North Pekin and downtown that you can have alternatives of. You can also, go through from Safeway through the back roads through the residential area. Another thing is people say, well, we have Dyke Road. Dyke Road has flooded. It will flood. Actually, this area will flood again. A little bit of history. In 1876, there was so much flooding here that it washed out a cemetery. In the 1894, they could put steamboats all the way across the bottoms to rescue people out of their houses. So I have a problem also with saying you have to keep all your water on your own property. Woodland has a very high water level. You have to pump that out. If you keep it in, that weakens the dikes. In 1996, there was 4 feet of water where the high school is sitting. And I have I have photos of that. So, and then I also have problems with the potential buffers that they tried to pass last year in the state of Washington when they put 200-foot buffers on either side of anything of a wetland and of a ditch. If they did that on my farm, it would take 38% of our land, straight off the top. I kind of calculated out the roads that they potentially want to do. That could take out 18% of our land. So I have many, many different issues. Again, you have your stakeholders of the landowners and the bottoms, and I'm going to tell you right now, those landowners are not stupid. Farmers are not stupid, and people kind of assume that. So if you, and then another thing that I have is the, what was the other one here I wrote down? Oh, I think I kind of hit the high points here of what I wanted to say. But it is not an easy solution. But I do know one thing, is that housing and farms don't mix. Housing and industry can be good neighbors because people love to see farms. They don't want the dust. They don't want the sounds. They don't even like the cracker guns now that we're trying to chase off those billions of geese that are going all over the place. In Vancouver, there were some farmers that were harvesting berries in the middle of the night, and they called the sheriff on them to shut them down, even though there's a right to farm law in the state of Washington. So they couldn't harvest their berries. In Vancouver, there's another farm that the Department of Ecology, even though they had a water claim, took away their water. So it's highly complex. We have issues, and I'm glad we're here today. I stumbled across this meeting kind of by accident, and I'm glad I'm here today. I'm always willing to talk to anybody, and Jennifer knows full good and well I'm more than willing to give my opinion. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you for that. I think we all depend on the farmers, and thank you, Chief, for your service. So, to reintroduce myself, I'm Jerry Big Eagle. I am the Cowlitz Indian Tribe TIPO officer. So we all know, speaking of regulatory issues with all these projects, every time there's groundbreaking, it involves me. So I do a lot of permit reviews when there are construction applications around in this area, and the protection of cultural resources is really important to the tribe. And you all know that the tribe is, I don't see any of the economic development people or the public works people on the meeting call, but they can probably speak better than I can to how many employees that the tribe employs now that actually live in Woodland, and they go over either to Longview or Ridgefield and work. And all the many projects, I think there's 4 Port of expansions going on right now. There's a couple of bridge improvement projects that are really affecting this area, that will be in the future. And yeah, and I do review a lot of projects with fisheries. I'm a former fishery biologist, and I became the NRD director, and then after that took over the THIPO program for the tribe. But yeah, so I do track all the fisheries issues and the geese and the Pacific flyway issues that are going on. There's just so much to think about. This area I know has a really high water table. It's really tough to build anything. It has a great history. But yeah, we have our work cut out for us as planners and city council and people that are in leadership positions for these. And I appreciate the comparison of the traffic with housing expansion. I just moved here not too long ago, and so I looked at all the available housing in this area with Woodland and Ridgefield and Battlegrounds and Vancouver, and I made a big comparison of all that. And I think I was kind of surprised with the city of Woodland and how how available housing there was. So anyway, so yeah, I left my card right here, and thank you for having me, and thank you for that. Thank you, Chief.
I'd like to reiterate what Jennifer said at the beginning on the standards and the consistency of standards, having recently built half-street improvements on a county road to city standards with county inspectors, with only county-approved backfill materials. It is a cobweb of expenses that are going to hinder our development. And there's one Aaron forgot. Oh, by the way, my name is on that 2016 comp plan, and I think before the 2016 comp plan, we actually had a transportation plan for the industrial portion of the Woodland Bottoms that city staff somehow managed to just forget about. Just absolutely forget about. And
in 2016 or since then?
Before. Aaron's better with dates, huh?
It was done before that. 2010, adopted in the county resolution. Staff just blindly and actually fixed the problem on Davidson Avenue Railroad crossing. And I kept bringing it up, and they said, oh, you're wrong. So I actually went through resolution by resolution and pointed it out and presented it to the city council.
So we have to stick with what we're going to do. That's, there's not much sense in doing this. And I've seen the city in my 15 years on planning commission do a lot of studies and get a lot of grant money for more studies and everything, and we're just still doing studies and things. I think it's great that everybody's at the table. I think I have another thing that might be on that list that I've never gotten an answer to: the soil structures of the bottoms and just exactly what will the bottoms support, especially industrial wise. How many the bedrocks at an unknown level underneath Walmart. I think it was 22,000 gravel pilings that went underneath Walmart, and it's a one-story building on a monolithic slab. It's basically floating on top of the soil. So we need to set goals for what can be built based on what can be built. So that's kind of always been an important thing to me. Let's chase good business that way too, right? So those are the only things I had to add right now.
talking about you guys all around.
We have some of our engineers listening.
I forgot one thing.
Sure.
Okay, I'm gonna choose it. One of the other things with going on in the bottoms is the homeless population camping out down there. There's some very scary areas down on the bottoms, and to let you know, there has been 2 recent drive-by shootings in Woodland. And right now I have 2 bullets in one of my houses. So that is a definite problem of what's going on.
Sorry, I didn't mean to not call you guys out.
No, you're fine.
Is that a blessing or a curse?
We are in attendance. We are, This was something that we believed that this was before Wayne and mine's time within the department. However, I've been at the county 25 years and been part of building and planning prior, 12 years prior. So my role is new, but to the county, not. The Woodland Bottoms, our comp plan has been updated in 2018, I think, 17, that encompasses and what is already set in the rules and regulations for what can and can't be done for that area. And I think it was Woodland that I think was kind of the back and forth that got us here. But we're open to discussions. However, I mean, the county has a plan for that area, and we are, you know, we're here listening and we're here to see what we can do. But I'm gonna turn it over to Wayne. He's my planning manager. But I mean, we're here to try to solve anything we can and to do, I mean, forward thinking and do the right thing. But I know Mark Smith is online as well, and our planning commission has spent, I mean, endless hours and days and meetings, and for many, many moons, it took us over 30 years to update our original comp plan that was adopted in the 70s. So we do have a current plan that we are trying to live by. It's just, I think it's just what Woodland, I guess, needs to do. But hearing your numbers, we still have a lot of land available that isn't like pulling over into the Woodland Bottoms yet, into the egg area. So it's kind of it's a bitter struggle, yeah. But we're looking at long term. And I'll turn it to Wayne if you want to say anything. Got lots.
Are there any hands raised online by any chance?
Hi, Wayne Nelson, planning manager. So, enlightening, I'll say, to hear the message from the horse's mouth rather than, you know, going back and even looking at old comp plans or resolutions or whatnot. So this is very helpful. I appreciate that. I guess to go back to the beginning with the initial comments with respect to the infrastructure and the dual standards or varying standards, I agree with that wholeheartedly, that needs to be rectified and reconciled in short order. And I think that can be accomplished through a variety or one or more interlocal agreements with the affected parties, meaning the city, the Dyking District, the port, et cetera, outside of the comprehensive planning efforts. So if we can sit down and get the respective public works departments, again, the port, whomever, and identify what those services are that that warrant extension or expansion, and to what standard, we can achieve that through a variety of interlocal agreements. And so I think the county would be fully in support of that effort. With respect to the growth and the use of the Woodland Bottoms, the historical aspect on it is right on par with respect to, it is largely Ag 38. There is a east and west portion of it, and in looking at that, the reason you're not seeing the high density residential development out there is because that's not in alignment with the comprehensive plan. However, that property is largely unzoned, and so that does introduce the conversion from ag lands into the industrial or the commercial uses, and so that's why you're seeing that sort of development as opposed to large scale high density residential development. in terms of looking at the expansion of the UGA, and Tracy touched on it somewhat, in my opinion, it doesn't look like the existing numbers, the existing growth warrant any expansion. City of Woodland is well under their projected growth from the existing comprehensive plan, and hearing the numbers today, substantially under. With respect to the county and our growth and our current comprehensive plan, we're still averaging around 8% annually. And so there's not an urgent need in the eyes of the county to jump out in front of this thing where there's not a fire to put out. We're just over halfway through our current comprehensive plan and relatively comfortable with that plan and the progress we've achieved by it. So again, in terms of priority, an interlocal agreement with respect to infrastructure would definitely be a priority. And not speaking for Woodland, but just listening to what I heard today, it sounds like Woodland has a significant exercise in front of them, or task in front of them, getting into their comp plan updated, consistent with Clark County's schedule of 2025. So that would be a second tier priority. And then I'll say, concurrent with all of that, the county needs to be looking forward. Says, okay, we are over halfway through, so we do have a 2027 update, and so we want to be active in these processes as well. So when we do make our comp plan update, we're prepared for that, and it's in light of what's happening behind us. So I guess where I'm going with all of that is we're happy to have a seat at the table and welcome any additional comments, questions, and we're very much a willing participant in the city's direction.
If there's anybody online, if you'd like to raise your hand or put a question in the chat or let us know, because that pretty much gets us through the end of the agenda. So if you don't have anything else, I don't see anybody turning their microphone on. So with that, we will convert the notes that are on the notepad. We'll put that in note form, and we will also get it attached to the agenda as a document. Figure out what to do next on this. So there is funding issues, whether or not we're going to hire consultants to do any of this education and outreach work or the planning work itself. So we will be having that conversation, and our contact information will be on the website. Now that I think about it, we should probably add a contact point for both the county and the city on the project page. So if you want it to come through me, since it is the city's webpage, I'd be more than happy to do that and just CC you on any of that. So my information is on the community development webpage, but we'll make sure it's on the project page as well. So unless anybody has any final thoughts, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
He looked familiar. He was in the office when we came in.
Recording stopped.
Hi. Jennifer, it's nice to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time. I apologize. I walked right past you. How rude. I'm so sorry.
Well, I want to make you guys aware, we have both of our Mark Bar properties went into a right of entry. Both are being negotiated for leases right now.